Session. And board members, just like usual, we'll go through each item, and if there's any issue or something you want to pause or discuss or questions about, then we'll just go ahead and do that. All right, so the first item is approval of the agenda, including changes, and so I do have one change here. Instructional technology and seat management contract added item 12.1, 12.1 CACI task order number 2-117 revision 1 for the installation of data drops and modular furniture at Central Administrative Complex for the relocation of the Human Resources Department, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist Seat Management, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. This is an emergency request due to having received an updated quote. So that's a change to the agenda. All right, then we go to recognitions. We're showing none. We're showing no visitors. Public comment, and this is be members of the public desiring to address the school board. And so I see I do have a blue card for our workshop from Mr. Raymond Hope regarding the best and brightest scholarships. And Mr. Hope lives in Baker, Florida. And Mr. McInnes, if you would provide an outline to Mr. Hope so that he can make his 4 minutes of remarks.
Yes, sir.
Come forward, Mr. Hope.
And Mr. Hope, you'll have 4 minutes to make your remarks, and if you have anything you'd like to give to the board, you can distribute that to the secretary.
It won't take as long this time.
Well, I think that was our fault, actually.
Oh, no. Since the last meeting, I have got in touch with Brevard Public Schools, who have been paying their teachers of adult career education, career technical education, and they have been paying their pre-K teachers, the best and brightest. They have been audited since then, and the audit findings were good. And she explained to me what method they used for making the decision and determining eligibility. Now I have emailed her, that's what I sent y'all, I've emailed her a summary of our conversation on the phone, and I'm waiting on a response back from her. I just sent this email to her this morning. So hopefully once we get that back, that will help in making a decision here.
Any questions or comments, board members?
Good information to have.
All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Hope.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so moving down to Section 6, we're showing no administrative personnel appointments. Section 7, committee and staff reports, workshop only. We received the superintendent's annual financial report and program cost report for the year ended June 30th, 2018, presented by Mrs. Scallon.
Rita, take time.
Sure, come forward, Ms. Scallon.
You've not received that yet, but you will on Friday. It's late backup just because of the time crunch and constraints that we have, but you've received the budget documents.
I should have said should have received. All right, 7.2, in-county travel paid for the period of August 9th through the 22nd through 2018, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. And we did receive that. And then 7.3, out-of-county travel paid for the period of August the 9th through the 22nd, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. All right, consent agenda. 8.1, approval. 8.2, remove and approval of the minutes of the capital outlay budget workshop of August 17, 2018, recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.3, approval of the minutes of the special meeting of August 23rd, 2018, minutes of the workshop meeting August 23rd, 2018, minutes of the regular meeting August 27th, 2018, all recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.4, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds to Okaloosa STEM Academy for pre-K playground equipment in the amount of $74,081.17, presented by Board Member Melissa Thrush and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.5, request to advertise the public hearing for revision of School Board Policy 03-14, Home Education, presented by Mr. Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent, MIS, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
Dr. White,
Yes, ma'am.
I had a couple of
Sure.
questions, and I'm sorry to
Yeah.
put you on the spot, Mr. Horton, because I didn't contact you earlier. And I'm just going to pull it up. And I didn't know if it was a statutory requirement, but I noticed under the termination section, it said that it was not required by the parent to notify the district of termination. But then later on in the document, the district does have the responsibility to maintain enrollment and annual evaluation documentation for homeschool students. So I guess I was wondering why parents weren't required to notify us of termination, because then it makes it harder for us to do due diligence on our required record keeping.
Yes, ma'am. I have to
if
take a
we
look
don't
at
know
that because that's not the intent of it. We do have a request, a requirement that they notify us when they end the program within a certain amount of time. And so if that's stated in there, I'll have to take a look exactly what you're referring to and
Yeah,
maybe
let me try to-
make an update to that.
And it could just be my my error in understanding the wording, but I thought my notes were that it was under the termination section, so,
Ms. Thrush, I'm looking at C1, where
Yes.
there's some redlining. As I'm reading that second paragraph,
yes.
there is a requirement to file a written notice of termination with the Office of Independent Education, which, as I read earlier in the policy, is one of our departments.
Okay,
So that would still come into our department that oversees the homeschool program as I'm reading this.
I think that's what was confusing to me, because we crossed out that they didn't have to file it with the superintendent of.
Yes, ma'am.
But then it just says Office of Independent Education, and I didn't know if that was a state office or if that was our office.
That's been Ms. Kitchens the whole time.
Okay,
That's
okay.
And so want to make sure that parents are aware that the letter didn't have to go directly to the superintendent, but essentially that's her designee, the
Okay,
Office of
so as long as they have to
Independent
notify
Yes,
us,
ma'am, they
because I
do.
just thought, well, how are we going to record keep
Yes,
if
ma'am.
we
It's
don't know if they're
complicated enough
leaving?
as it is,
Right.
but yes, ma'am, that's right.
Okay. And then the other question I had on there was, I think it was in section F, it's in number 6. It talked about, being enrolled in public school, and let me scroll down to that section. I guess I wanted clarification on what is considered enrollment. So if you're a homeschool student, this document states that you're allowed to participate in extracurricular activities at your zone school or via our controlled open enrollment plan. So are they considered an enrolled student if that's the case, and then not an enrolled student if they're strictly homeschooled and don't participate at a school in anything?
Yeah, that is correct, essentially. So if a student, and the board knows this, that they are eligible to come and take classes with our existing students if space is available, and then they become enrolled and they're required to provide all the information that our typically enrolled students would have to provide. We would report those students for FTE. If it is a swimming program and the student wanted to participate in the swimming program, but there was no school day component to that, then they would not be an enrolled student for the purposes of FTE reporting.
Okay.
But they would be eligible to participate in an extracurricular event of some sort, which is, I think, existing as currently the case.
Okay.
Yeah, but if we're enrolling them in courses and reporting them for FTE, which we're statutorily able to do, then they would be an enrolled student with us.
Okay, and so I think that's what I was wondering on the report card process, like what was considered an enrolled student. So only if they're, if we're collecting FTE on them.
Yes, ma'am. And if you'd like, I'll speak to you afterward, and if there's some language you'd like to add in there to clarify, we'd be happy to look at that with you.
Okay.
Okay. Anything
Thanks.
else?
Nope. that was
Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. All right, moving on to item 8.6, authorization to appropriate federal impact aid funds and make a payment in the amount of $12,668 to charter schools and AMI Kids Emerald Coast, presented by Ms. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent.
And
Sure.
again, Dr. White,
Sure.
this is just for the public, but I know this is just, we're kind of the pass-through organization to pass through impact funds for charter schools in our area, and that's this item. But I mean, the documentation that you included kind of shows not only what the allocation is to each of those charter schools, but again, I just think it's sometimes a misconception in the community, the amount of funds that we're receiving for impact funds. And again, we receive those because the federal government owns so much property in Okaloosa County. But if I read the document correctly, you know, roughly the district is receiving $3,300,000 or around just over $3 million. Is that correct?
What happens is we receive federal impact aid money, but then we also, after years close, if there are residual funds left, then they reappropriate those funds to all of the participating eligible counties. And so what you're looking at there is this was for the 2015-16 claiming year. So this is a prior year. So that voucher that's attached, we had already received about 2.7 million. So that other 300,000 is a prior year payment that was left over
for that year.
For that year.
Okay.
So typically what we've been getting for the last 5, 6, 7 years has been about $2.7 million per year. Now sometimes we do receive some funds from prior years if there's funds left over.
Okay. But you know, again, that pales in comparison to the loss in property tax value that we would receive if that property was held privately.
All right, 8.7, budget amendment number 11, fiscal year 2017-2018, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 8.8, monthly financial statement for June 2018, revised, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.9, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.10, tag on bid purchase over $25,000, Playmore Recreational Products and Services, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.11, multi-year purchase, Turton, presented by Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.12, sale and disposal of surplus property, presented by Mr. Steve Bolton, Director of Facilities Planning and Maintenance, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.13, joint use agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the City of Crestview for Sand Spur Field, North Avenue in Crestview, presented by Mr. Bolton, Director of Facilities, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Dr. White, I have
Yes,
a
ma'am,
couple of
sure.
questions. So I don't know, Mr. Bolton, if I should address them to you, or in the agreement, it talks about construction, and it said that any improvements shall conform to city construction standards. But then later in the document, it says that, you know, anything that is built, the district owns because it is on our property. And so I was wondering if the construction standards would need to meet district standards. And I'm not saying ours are more stringent than the cities or theirs are, I don't know. But if if the city was to construct something on that property, and then we are the owners of whatever got constructed, it would need to conform to our construction standards.
Yes, ma'am, and one of the reasons that section also provides that if they're going to do that, they have to submit those requests and those plans through the district to be approved. So
Okay.
our facilities people would be seeing that and approving that on behalf of the superintendent before they would commence that kind of construction. I
Okay.
know that initially, when this agreement was done some years ago, I believe there was some fencing that was done, things of that nature that were really not building construction, but they were improvements to the site. But the city obviously would have to have building codes in place, just like the school district follows building codes. But our safety net there is that they have to submit those plans and requests to the school district to be approved before they could commence something like that.
Okay. And then the other issue was, and again, we have agreements with other municipalities to share some of our fields and outdoor facilities in regards to pets being allowed, tobacco products. The district has a no smoking, vaping, tobacco policy. And so I didn't know if anything like that needed to be in the agreement in regards to animals being on the property or smoking on the property and things like that.
Well, we've put up signs in the past. I couldn't tell you if they're still there around that field or not, but the signage of tobacco products went up on all facilities and athletic facilities, etc. The pet sign may be there, I can't recall, but we can check into that and get back with you to see if that sign is there.
I know
But
for the city of Crestview, they pretty
yeah,
much
they-
have no smoking and
Yeah.
no pets and all
They
that.
manage it. They've actually improved the field. They've sodded it, irrigated it.
Right.
That's really all they've done. The fencing is the same fence. They had plans to get with the homeowners on the south side of that, and they never have done that as of yet.
But is it Northwood that's closest to this
Northwood,
facility?
yes.
Are we using that location during school hours?
The agreement allows for them to, but every time I've been by the school, I've never seen them on the field. They may use it for some big field days or some other type of school days.
And I guess that was my other concern, just because, again, like in regards to the tennis center being at Ruckle or the facility over at Destin Elementary, for example, if it can be used by the city residents or citizens during school hours, because I know that issue has come up where we have, people obviously on our campus technically, and those locations are a little different than this location, but will it be used during school hours? And that would be my only other.
I would need to check with Dr. Good, but
Mm-hmm.
but every time I've been by there, I've never seen anybody out there during the school day. It's always after hours with the little league teams and things
Right.
like that.
But we addressed that in section 5, because what we call for under the agreement is that priority for use of the facilities is given to the public schools, and the facilities shall not be scheduled for use by the city during any times when organized school activities are scheduled for the facility, and then if there's any scheduling dispute, the principal at Northwood Elementary makes the final decision.
Okay. So any, like you just stated, Little League games or stuff like that, if there was going to be a overlap with a field day or some type of presentation or something, that would already
The
be
priority goes to the
coordinated.
school activity.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. All right. 8.14, vehicle maintenance and repair agreement between the School Board of Okaloosa County and AMI Kids Emerald Coast Incorporated, presented by Mr. Jay McInnes, Program Director of Transportation, and recommended by the Superintendent. 8.15, employee benefit renewals for the 2019 plan year, presented by Mr. Russ Frakes, Specialist, Risk Management, and recommended by the Superintendent. Superintendent, you have staff members here.
I do.
Mr. Frakes.
Frakes.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Would you introduce your guest?
Yes, I would. I would like to. This is Vicki Whaley. She's with FBMC Benefits Management out of Tallahassee. Of course, the district's broker for all of our employee benefits package. She's come along with me this morning. We're going to talk to the board, speak with the board about a couple of things related to the renewal of our benefits package. With that, I guess, Vicki, I'll let you go ahead, and we'll talk about a stewardship report initially that FBMC presented to the Benefits Oversight Group in our last meeting. So, Vicki?
Okay, Benefits Oversight Group.
The Benefits Oversight Group, yes.
Could you tell a little
Yes,
bit what that is for the
absolutely.
public?
That is a standing committee of representatives from the district and the unions that meet to review and make decisions on, vote for recommendations to be made to the superintendent regarding our employee benefits package. So
Because
all
those-
things related to our
Those
group
may
benefits.
be negotiable items.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And that
Right.
group, as I believe, is established under the collective bargaining agreements.
Okay.
All right. Vicki, we'll go ahead and.
Absolutely. So I believe you all have a copy of the stewardship report that we provided to the Benefit Oversight Group. In that report, one of the things that we did was we conducted a benchmarking survey to compare your current employee benefit program to other similarly situated benefit programs of similar sizes, similar group makeups. One of the things that we noticed as we were doing that benchmarking study was that when we look at the way that your benefit designs are set up today, that they were very much in line with what we're seeing as the standard, as the benchmark, so to speak. One of the areas that your plan is actually set up better for is in the out-of-pocket maximums and the deductibles. Your deductibles are actually lower than what the deductible is in the benchmark study for the highest, most popular version, and your deductible is actually, or your out-of-pocket, is actually a little bit less than what the standard is. Once we completed that benchmarking study, one of the other things we did was we evaluated claim data and data going on with your plan so that we could see areas for improvement and potential gaps that we may have. What we noticed in that was that we have a high utilization of the plan with in-network providers. We have 97% of your employees using network providers, which is a great standard to have. We also noticed that there was a 6.8% increase in the emergency room utilization. That's not a trend that we would want to see in any plan. We don't want people going to the emergency room. We want them going to other places to access care. Some of the other things we noticed was that our dependent to member ratio is really low. We've got a 1 dependent to every 4 members. What that means for you is that as your population continues to age, we're not bringing young dependents into the plan to offset the costs of the aging population, which tends to have more claim costs. So while we are seeing a reduction in the trend, we've been trending at about 9%, and what we saw this last year was a 6% trend. So we are seeing an improvement in the trend overall, but we think that by adding more healthier, younger population to the plan, that overall what we're going to be able to do is bring the loss ratios down and be able to have long-term sustainability in premiums. Obviously, younger, healthier people that aren't using the plan as much but are generating premium versus an older population that's not generating as much premium but still using a lot of the plan services. In addition to that, we've, do you want me to go into renewal now?
Sure.
So when we take all of that data and we put it together, what we decided to do was go back to United Healthcare and ask them to evaluate their renewal that they provided for this year. We were able to negotiate that renewal down to a 12.8% increase for the existing plans. We also made the recommendation that...
Can I ask a question? Or
Absolutely.
do you want me to wait until the end? What's best?
Go ahead.
You said negotiate down
Yes.
to what kind of increase?
The underwritten rate was 12.8% increase for the year. The underwriting formula that's in place, that's agreed to by United Healthcare and in our contract,
Right.
generated a 28% renewal. So
28% increase.
28% renewal. In other words, based on our claims, based on our experience, that's what they would calculate our renewal. That's what the underwriters wanted. Now, certainly that's, United Healthcare, there are other factors that come into play.
I understand.
And again, FBMC worked to negotiate that and got that down to the 12.8. So.
Well, I guess congratulations.
It doesn't feel like it, but sure, thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that way.
Well, and some of the ways that we negotiated that rate down, some of the things that we worked with the Benefit Oversight Group to do was you know, one of the concessions that we asked from United Healthcare was to bring a United Healthcare representative on site 2 days a week starting in January.
Okay.
This will help us to increase the population health overall, and have an easier access for employees who may be having questions or concerns or looking for ways to get access to some type of care.
Good.
In addition to that, one of the other things that we see that United Healthcare has done, based on, you know, their experience here in the district, was we have Quest Diagnostics coming back into the plan starting January 1st. So they were able to negotiate a contract. So again, back on January 1st, we'll have Quest Diagnostics
That's
coming
in
back
addition
in.
to LabCorp.
we'll have both.
Yes.
So we'll have
Choice.
both. So you're going to have more choice now, and
Okay.
that's one of the long-term struggles that we've had with LabCorp.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
no facility in the Niceville area, so that left a market that was underserved, certainly. We've tried to alleviate that with hours and address their personnel issues. Ultimately, this UHC came in and said there was some things going on nationally with Quest, with United Healthcare, and they were able to leverage that to allow us to bring Quest and LabCorp, have both of those options available to all of our employees. That'll, I think, will help, and certainly help here in the Niceville area.
Okay, very good.
We have Quest, but no LabCorp.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Russ mentioned was the underwriting formula that United Healthcare uses. In that formula, what they do is they look at the number of claims that we have, and they exclude claims over what they call a pooling point. Meaning, if your claims come above that pooling point, then those claims don't get counted into the underwriting formula. One of the things that we negotiated with them was to actually lower that pooling point from $350,000 being the cap there to $300,000, meaning more claims would be excluded in the next year's renewal, and they agreed to do that at no additional premium adjustment. So that was also a way that we were able to not only bring that premium down, but then next year's renewal, that will help us in next year's renewal because we'll have more claims that will be excluded from that formula, so to speak. During the process with the Benefit Oversight Group, we did not only look at United Healthcare. What we did was we conducted a competitive bid process for the other benefits that the district offers to your employees. That competitive bid process follows all of the regular standards of a competitive bid. We send it out to multiple bidders. Everyone gets the same package. Everyone responds. We evaluate those and provide all of the data back to the Benefit Oversight Group for their review. Upon their review, we made recommendations, and then they made the decisions on what benefits to choose. Some of the products that we brought back were there will be a 10% reduction in dental premiums with Delta Dental this year. So that is another benefit that we were able to bring back into the oversight group. That plan was actually not in renewal, so we weren't up for a competitive bid, but by going out to that process, we were able to see a reduction in premium. In addition to that, we were able to get extended terms, guaranteed rates for the other products that are staying with their existing carriers, so the life insurance, the disability insurance. Those things were able to receive a longer guaranteed rate with no additional increase in the premiums.
So I think we should highlight United Healthcare. Vicki talked about some of the problems that we've seen. We also spoke to the richness of the benefits that we've got, especially the medical benefits. The renewal this year will involve a couple of things to try to counteract some of the problems that Vicki talked about. We have very low number of dependents, that dependent ratio, less than 2. So in order to try to bring more people into the group, some of that healthier risk that maybe some young people, providing a more economically feasible means of a family to add family coverage. So we're adding additional tiers. So we're going from 2 tiers where we would have single or family coverage available previously. Now we'll have employee plus child or children and employee plus spouse tiers available. So that's a big change. In addition to that, there will be a 3rd plan available. So this will be a copay plan, so that someone can go to for an office visit copay of $40. They can go take themselves or a child or what have you to a primary care physician or specialist for a $40 copay, as opposed to simply paying the full price of an office visit. It'll be and the premium on that plan will be lower than what we have in our existing plans. So it'll be a more, in an attempt to drive some families, offer a more economically feasible option for those families to bring that, some additional dependents into the plan.
Okay. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, sir.
The old plan where it was just, you just brought in the family, and it didn't matter how many kids, correct?
That's correct.
And so the way we're doing it is going to be a better option than
It'll
that?
provide some more options so that if you've got somebody that's, you may have a family that has, the spouse has coverage, employer provided coverage available themselves. They've still got, which plan are we going to go on, mine or yours, or which plan are the kids going to go on, which is it more economically feasible to do so. This would provide another option if we can do employee plus children, provide an option for that, or single parents maybe would like that option. We've also got folks, you talked about our aging population, so we've got some empty nesters out there as well. So those people would have the ability to provide an employee plus spouse plan that would be a pretty substantial savings if you compare what they were paying, having to pay the family premium versus what now will be available to them as an option for an employee plus spouse via,
Of course, that's driven by how many's in the family, right? I can remember with 4 children, it was a good deal.
Yes. Yes, it's a great deal it's a great deal. I've got 5 myself, so it's a great deal. You've got a lot of kids,
So
but
that option's still there, right?
that's correct. Absolutely, none of those. Nothing is taken away. This is only additional coverage that's available, and something that we feel like will provide us with a step in the right direction, trying to solve this overall problem. And Vicki and I were meeting with Lisa Sunday before we came in here today and talking about just our overall strategy and what we're doing. And this is certainly something that it's a multi-year project for us to do. This is a step in that incremental step that we'll attempt to solve this over, bring a solution to the plan, and hopefully put some downward pressure on our premiums and just kind of try to hold the line of wherever possible. So. We've seen some of those things moving in the right direction. Some of the numbers that have come out, we've seen moving in the right direction as well. So it is encouraging.
Here's the thing that basically this board has to realize, and all the information we're getting this morning is great and wonderful. But at some point in time, the superintendent of this board is going to have to deal with reality of one thing. We're going to have to look at the 20-hour work week that we now pay full benefits insurance with. We're going to have to realize that our employees, all of our employees, is going to fix to have to start paying some portion of the premium. And ladies and gentlemen, as they've just told you, every year, what basically after we've finished all this talk this morning, what's going to be the increase this year? Just what's the percentage increase?
12.8%.
Okay, 12.8. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what's fixing to happen? Unfortunately, I'm going to be leaving, but you people are going to have to deal very rapidly. One thing that we're going to have to quit paying the programs that we have. We're going to have to change. You're going to have to, and this is a perfect example of it. Even by restructuring, doing everything, 12.8%. But at some point in time, we're going to have to look at, as unpleasant as it is, our employees are going to have to start paying part of their premium. Our administrators, we're going to have to get out of the 20-hour work week to at least what 99% of all other districts do, is a minimum of 30. And I'm just saying, as Miss Gahan can tell you, this next year is going to be terrible, terrible. And with all this that we're discussing this morning is fine and good, but at some point we've got to, this board is fixing to have to deal and face the fact that and we've been putting it off for years, ladies and gentlemen. But the bottom line is it's going to have to be dealt with, and it's going to have to be dealt with fairly soon. And at 12.8%, what convert that to money for me if you can. I mean, how much? I mean, y'all do understand the point I'm making here, and it is as unpleasant as it is. Our employees and the way that we are, the benefits we're we're giving, and you have to understand that the terrible thing about benefits is basically it's human nature. They don't count it as money. You understand? It's not counted as money. But this board, and I feel sorry for you, but it's going to have to be faced, and it's going to have to be faced very rapidly. I mean, you know, and as Russ pointed out earlier, originally they talked about we got us a great deal. Appreciate Russ and him doing it, but hey, what they start out wanting 20-something%, huh?
Correct.
Well, I mean, and I'm gonna hush, but now this board is something that we've been putting off for years. Do you realize just on the 20-hour work week, if y'all go back and look, that is tremendous amount of money, and we're the only district left in the whole, probably the country, but especially state of Florida, that's doing that. But we've got to, those kind of things, we've got to go, folks, and that's what we have to understand, and we all understand. It doesn't matter where it's United, who it is. We all know one thing. Insurance is going to go up no matter what you do. We all know that. But we've got to deal with it. And I feel sorry for Miss Jackson and this board because, as Miss Gallion can tell you, this next year looks terrible. And these decisions, when it comes to dealing with our teachers and our non-instructional employees, we look at trying to think of some way to give them a little pay raise and then understand that, hey, you throw in 12.8% increase just in insurance alone, gentlemen. I'm on us, but this board needs to realize that I think that action is going to have to take place immediately to deal with those problems. And Russ and them have done a great job of doing the things that they're going to save us money. But hey, 12.8%, folks, that's pretty sporty, huh?
And Ms. Walker, I just add to your remarks, and I agree with them. The issue associated with this is that when we receive our funding from the legislature, and it's a minimal per student amount, it's not even enough to meet the cost of doing business, especially when the cost escalates by 12%. It's a point of diminishing returns. And so it's even further complicated by the lack of revenue generated with the school district by the legislature. There's no question. And I think that when we start looking at those kinds of things, like you're talking about the 20-hour week, I think it becomes incumbent upon us to look at some other cost-saving measures as well, because we certainly hate to take all of this out from the employees, but I understand.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you very much for your work and your negotiating. I know that's difficult. I know from a family member who owns a business and insurance, it's almost like a losing battle all the time. But you have helped us be able to do some things for our employees, and that is exceptional to me. Mr. Walker, this is something Rita and I have discussed for the last few years. We look at the dollars, we look at the money, and when you consider a 12% increase, you're looking at, Rita, millions of dollars. We have to come up with in order to be able to cover that. Now, our goal, your goal, my goal has always been to take care of our employees. But I understand that sometimes we have to do things that we may not necessarily like to do. And what I do appreciate is something that Russ and I have discussed for a long time, is offering different types of, like a dad and a child, instead of a whole family premium. That is big, and will make a significant difference to some of our employees. I'm especially glad you can go back. We can go back to Quest now. I like to go to Quest, and I'm very happy about like the other people. It's just I like that company and their service. But I do understand what Mr. Walker is saying, and Rita and I sit a lot of times and look particularly at insurance. When you have retirement benefits going up and we have to cover that. And like Mr. White said, when you get 47 cents per student increase, you're exactly right. That doesn't begin to even cover the cost of doing business. So the money has to come from somewhere. And oftentimes it's painful where it has to come from. And I just know that I don't disagree with Mr. Walker and that we're going to have to take a hard look. But I'm one of those employees that has benefited for a long time with no premium. And for all of us sitting here today, it's going to be a hard fit. I heard that, Mr. Walker. I heard that, Mr. Walker. But I am grateful. I am grateful for what you've done and working with the insurance company. They're a hard group to move, and a really hard group to move. But you've helped us. When I first heard that 28% increase, I almost lost it. I thought, where in the world? But thank you for that work you've done, and we still have more work to do. We've got some decisions to make. Thank you so much.
Any other comments?
I was just going to say, I know the comments I heard from employees was they wanted more options, and obviously we listened. And the comment on Mr. Walker's remark about part-time employees, most private businesses, it's about 30 hours a week before you can even, and you have to maintain that to qualify for insurance. So what he's saying is true. And we, for 20-hour employees, we offer this benefit. So, it is a huge benefit for our employees to still have that, especially the 20-hour employees.
And it's 30 hours comes from the requirement established by the Affordable Care Act, of course.
Exactly.
And certainly we're more generous than that. At 17.75, I think, for instructional, so it's even a little bit lower for them. But yes, it's certainly a very generous benefit and very expensive, of course. So.
And catch 22 for us, is teachers are hard to come by. I've been reading all the national stats and Florida stats on where we're going to get these people. And I believe Florida is way behind what we pay teachers. It wasn't me.
And Superintendent, I would add,
It's a catch-22.
in particular, there's a classification of employees that receive this benefit at 20 hours that they're also getting hard to find. That we provide in comparison to what the private sector offers. That this has a benefit that's able to retain those employees at that lower rate of pay.
And that's 20-hour employees. I mean, that's what I was going to add, that the catch-22. We had a great hiring this year for non-instructional and instructional, and if we start to have to make a change to our benefits, that will impact our ability to recruit and maintain employers. The positive thing I would say is every other county in the state of Florida is having to make these decisions. But that was in the survey, you said we were comprehensive what was being provided. Are there other districts, I'm not sure if our neighboring districts, for example, are currently offering, employee health insurance for the employee at no cost.
Residential survey, this is a of other similarly sized public sector entities with HRA deductible plans. We encourage you efforts we can is enhance that benchmark study to bring it to local life and compare you directly to other districts. Keep in mind though, when offers to be significantly different. If you're trying to they can offer to their employees
maintain their accreditation, and the school district maintain their accreditation. But all of these evaluation systems and training systems make our teachers better and make them more effective and more instrumental in our students' lives. But it's very comprehensive, and I appreciate the efforts that we're trying to make it easier for teachers to get these in-service points that are required, and to meet the requirements they have, but also to make them better and more effective at what they do in the classroom. So I hate that some of these items just come to us as large documents, and I wish the community could see truly what's required of each of our instructors, not just inside the classroom on a day-to-day. They also do so much more, whether it's peer mentoring, coaching people training to be teachers, and going to seminars and learning new techniques and about new technology. It's staggering.
I don't know how Ms. McLaughlin keeps up with all of it, but she manages to do that, and I'm like you, I'm amazed. It's just huge. And thank you, Denise.
All right, thank you. All right, 8.20, school-to-work contracts between the School Board of Okaloosa County and school-to-work program providers to provide career experience opportunities to eligible students at Richburg School and Silver Sands School, presented by Mrs. Melody Summer, Program Director, Exceptional Student Education, and recommended by the Superintendent.
Dr. White, I'd like to comment.
Yes, sir, Mr. White.
Ms. Sumner, thank you again for all your hard work in getting these businesses on board. I do want to thank the businesses that are mentioned here, because they are opening up the door for these students to have an opportunity to experience real-life work experiences. So I know the last time I was at Richburg, they were actually getting ready to go to work, and you should just see the looks on their face when they're all excited about going to their prospective employers. So kudos to these businesses, and kudos to you for getting these people on board.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. All right, moving on to Section 9, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. All right, 9.1, Employees on Administrative Leave, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction. This is an information item. 9.2, Deferred Retirement Option Program, DROP, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction. 9.3, Request to advertise a public hearing for the adoption of a new job description for Assistant Route Coordinator, Transportation, presented by Mrs. Lindsay Maxey, Program Director, Human Resources, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval.
If I may,
Yes, ma'am.
please. Jay, could you join me? If you've not ever visited North Transportation, in the afternoons and in the mornings, I suggest you go up there. Where other places have 60 and 40 buses they're dealing with, these guys are dealing with 103.
About at 100, yes, ma'am.
And it is unbelievable, just the radio traffic on there. These routes are very complicated, very difficult, and I have to commend Jay, because Jay, I've been here 5 years. This is the least amount of complicated issues that we've had. I've been shocked, because I'm usually sitting at my desk waiting on the phone to start ringing. But we've been able to work with parents. But the difficulty is there's so much to do, and you have one person trying to do all of that and manage what is going on there in that office. This is needed. It is something that I feel like, and I know people use this word so loosely, and I don't like to use it. when it comes to safety and it comes to dropping kids off and it comes to having them in the right place, to me this is critical, because many times in Jay's office, I see that the secretary's driving a bus, everybody in that office is driving a bus. The mechanics are driving buses. And I just am asking, I don't think begging is a proper term, but I've been there, I've seen it, and I would appreciate your consideration on this. We have to do something. And I know, Mr. Bryant, you've been up there, you've ridden buses with them. It is a feat when you think about getting all those kids on the right bus and getting them to the right place every afternoon. And that's not counting all the phone calls and things. My little Bob needs to ride bus 9211 and they've worked to get us a good system going in there. And I saw this morning where, I forget which county it was on the principal news, that they can't get bus drivers, so they're raising their rate to $13 an hour. And a lot of our bus drivers make that and a little bit more than that. So we're not the only people in the business that can't get bus drivers. But please, I'm asking that the board consider this when you make this decision. This is not about just creating a position. This is about something that they've been asking for months. And I just hope that you'll consider it to help us out in that area. And that's all I got to say.
I have one comment about this position, and I think it's just by my experience up at North Transportation. But my biggest thing is that I'm hoping that if this does get approved by the board, that maybe for the North Transportation end, with the drivers and mechanics and everybody up there, it gives Mr. Duffy more time to work with those employees.
Yes.
Because I'm concerned about the turnover rate also.
Yes.
And you know, we just lost a couple of drivers.
Yes.
And I hope that this will help bridge that communication with our drivers up on the north end and free Mr. Duffy up to do a lot more of what he should be doing, which is managing with those bus drivers and all.
Did you have anything you wanted to say, Jay?
No, ma'am. I just appreciate your willingness to look at this for us, and hopefully we can put this position to good work. I believe that this position will free us up to do more ESE situations up there and things of that nature. We have Southside and Richburg, and that ESE population is growing, and
unbelievable.
Mr. Duffy spends a lot of his time just working on ESE routes, so I'm hoping this person can help in that realm as well as some of the FTE stuff that we have going on. I'm up there 3 days a week myself and see what's going on and do what I can to help manage the system and the drivers. But having someone there again on a daily basis, I think, to help Mr. Duffy when I'm at one of the other offices is something I think we really need. So I appreciate your consideration.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McGinnis.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on to 9.4. Approval to contract for legal services related to human resources and employee matters presented and recommended by Superintendent Mary Beth Jackson, Superintendent, for approval.
I guess I'm going to have to talk about this. I know.
Yes, ma'am, you put it on the agenda.
I did. This is something that has concerned me for a very long time. I did make several phone calls. When I say several, I mean 6. I'm not going to tell you I made hundreds. To several different counties and just talk with them about how they do this. And the one thing that came out of every single one of those conversations is what you want is a contract for consulting with a labor law attorney and someone who can help you with negotiations. Negotiations are very important to this district and very important to us. The other thing that I would say is You know, we spent a lot of money fixing problems this year that I believe we could have avoided. Had we had a person that does nothing but labor law look at some of the situations that we were in and say, you don't need to do this, but you need to do this. I'm not asking for someone to replace Jeff. We don't need someone to replace Jeff. We need Jeff. What I am asking for is a contract where someone can help us avoid the pitfalls that we find ourselves in frequently. And I don't like going to court. I don't like, because it's you guys that are the ones that are getting sued. They sued the board. What I'd like to do is to have a consultant who does nothing but this, who we say, we've got this situation with this employee. In your experience as doing this, what are the steps we should take? How should we handle this? What should we say? Because we're not lawyers. And employment law changes quite a bit. And you have to deal with the federal law, you have to deal with state law, you have to deal with contract, and school board policy. And we've made a lot of good changes in our HR department. I think those were needed, and we have done those through some policy changes that we have chosen to move forward with. This would be the step that would help complete that change and that metamorphosis that we've gone through. Times are different, folks. It's not the same as it was 25 years ago. It's not the same as it was, as one attorney told me yesterday, 15 years ago, I hardly had any of these kinds of cases. He says now districts call me constantly wanting me to take over and help with this. So we're not going to be asking you for more money. What we're asking for is to use a portion of what we already have to have contracted negotiator for us. And when I told them our CFO was doing our negotiation for them, they said, how in the world does that person have time to do that? And I said, well, she just works all the time. That's how she has time to do it. But he said, you need someone to consult with you, because what we may be interpreting in a policy as the right thing to do, or in state statute as the right thing to do. And Jeff has helped us so much with this. Jeff's got other things to deal with in the district. A lot of them, all these contracts that come before us, has nothing to do with Jeff. Absolutely nothing. It has everything to do with this school district being proactive and doing what is best to protect the district. And you know, my question to you, and I've tooted this horn, Mr. Walker, a bunch. I'm not asking for a personal attorney. I'm asking for a human resource consultant and a negotiator. And that's all I have to say about that. I'll answer any questions you have.
Well, I believe at the last board meeting or workshop, I had requested kind of a breakdown of legal services and the types of lawsuits that the district has been in, some, you know, historically, recent history, summary-wise. I know you mentioned workman's comp, which is also an issue. And I also want to make sure that if we're considering, and we do contract out currently with labor law attorneys as needed, but as you stated, sometimes you're not meeting them until the actual employee hearing or until there's a need to separate Mr. McGinnis's services. And I guess I want to be clear that in a way it would also be protecting our employees and that we're aware of things up front. Like to me, with the best and brightest issue that's before us, we dealt with this issue last year, but clearly we didn't deal with the issue. And it puts our employees and us at a disadvantage. And to me, I feel like we're in the same boat. We want to give, we would much rather have the funds and be able to use them to distribute to all of our employees, but that's not the way the law was written, and not to have a clear understanding of that last year when we voted to change what we were doing last year, and then to have to go back this year and potentially not, do the same thing. I think that puts our employees at a disadvantage as well. So it's not always that a labor law attorney would be against employees.
No.
It would specifically, it would potentially be a dedicated resource that, like you said, would review existing labor laws or current changes to laws, and quite frankly, the frequent changes in legislation that occurs as it relates to our school district and school districts throughout the state. So I don't look at it as an additional cost, in that when I looked at the summary of finances that we've been spending on legal services historically, certainly there's some fluctuation depending on any lawsuits that have been brought against the district. But are we going to have any kind of summary provided? I believe there's a report created. I mean, my understanding is there something that is already created through risk management?
I can send that. I have that from Russ.
Okay.
So I will be glad to send it to all the board members today.
So we can kind of have an understanding of what some of our issues are, knowing that, again, year to year that might vary, and the types of legal issues that we have as it relates to personnel.
And I guess the one thing that really struck me as I was talking to these guys and ladies all throughout the state, and to your point, he said, our job is not to hurt employees. Our job is to figure out a way to work it out. To figure out a way to work with our employees and let them know, look, you can't do this, and you're going to have to X, Y, and Z, and help us come up with plans to be able to help them not do that. I know that Mr. White has had to sit in on a bunch of agenda meetings with different conversations about different employee issues that we face on a regular basis. Sometimes Marcus will get 4. I mean, yesterday was kind of a banner day, Marcus. You just really were a busy fella. And it's things that are critical, but we're like, what's the best direction to go to resolve this? We don't want it to go to court. We don't want all of that. What we want is to protect our district, protect our employees, and protect the valuable resource of keeping these people on board with us. We are asking for help. I like I told you 1,000 times, and as one of the attorneys told me yesterday, there's so many lawyers now we don't know what to do with all of them, and I told you I don't need one. That office sitting right over there needs a consultant and someone who can help them avoid what we've had to go through. And I think had we had some things in place, we might not have experienced some of the things that we've experienced. And that's my opinion. But I am asking you to make this consideration. If we do it for a year and you only want to do it for a year, I'm fine with that until we see how it plays out. If it is to our benefit, then we'll know. But it's something that I feel like for the district is something that, as the superintendent and as the person that works with these people every single day and knows the questions and the issues they face, I think it's important that we have that resource available to us.
I have a question real quick, and I'm going to direct this at Mr. Chambers. Since you've been in the position that you're in now, do you feel like reaching out to Mr. McGinnis has helped you be able to get through, or do you feel like, you know, the request that she's making here with another attorney to help you with these matters, would that help speed up things in the future?
First of all, Mr. McGinnis has been helpful every step of the way, but there are instances where things come up on a daily basis where you want to get an answer immediately, so to speak. And once again, that's no indication that Mr. McGinnis has not given us sound advice and help, because he does. I would equate this to ESC with Julie Weatherly when almost unprecedented things occur or very difficult situations occur on the ESE realm. We get with Mr. McGinnis, who then funnels us to Julie Weatherly, so that way we get an expert opinion, so to speak, of someone who deals specifically with ESE. Come into the labor law piece, it's the same thing. Mr. McGinnis does a great job of helping us on probably 95% of the matters, and maybe more. But then there's that certain percent where, as I say, I'm blessed now, come into a situation where a lot of the things that are happening are firsts. So that's always a fun place to be. But if we have the ability to go through Mr. McGinnis, get to a labor law attorney who can give us clear direction for whatever the particular matter is, that would be very helpful.
So do you believe that if you were given this opportunity to have a lawyer directly for you, that would help with some of the issues that you have that Mr. McGinnis can't? That's what you're saying right now, that this particular lawyer will help with those issues that Mr. McGinnis can't address at that time?
Correct, and I think a lot of those issues are anomaly issues, things that are kind of out of the ordinary or things that rise to a certain level. It would be very helpful.
And the point that you made is just like Julie Weatherly. She is a person that we have on, I guess, retainer. But Julie knows ESE. All we have to do, all Melody has to do is pick up the phone and call her. And she has been a godsend to this district, because I think we have avoided some pitfalls. Now, we don't always like what she tells us, because we think we're right about something, and she will clearly point us in the right direction. And Jeff is the one that hooked us up with her, not hooked us up, but I'm sorry, I've been around kids for 2 days, who has helped us make that connection with her. And I know Marcus will call me and he'll say, "You're not going to believe this one, but here it is." And it's just a matter of having a safety net in place to protect the district. That's all it is. Because we keep Jeff very busy with all the contracts, we've spent a year on policies alone. And I just feel like this is something that would help us in the long run. Thank you.
Chairman, go ahead.
I was just going to, comment that we are the second largest employer in the county, over 3,000 employees. And again, I think in private industry, you would have even small businesses have somebody that they can contact in regards to labor law issues, especially with the variety of employees that we have, and the variety of job descriptions, and the types of jobs that we have, and the fact that they do involve children. So having an expert in those areas, and we have used somebody like that in the past, as needed. But again, I feel like, at least from my experience on the board, it's reactive when we're
Not
using
proactive.
that expertise and not on a proactive basis.
Correct. That's the point.
Just so I can be clear, you think you need this because lack of timely response from our legal counsel or expertise?
Not at all. I think, well, when I say not at all, so I mean some things have to be researched, and Mr. McGinnis does a great job with that. And I do want to take one step back, and then I'm going to go back to that question. I think if we were fortunate enough to get a labor law attorney to assist, I think we would be in the same boat as many districts across the state of Florida who have this ability, whether it's retaining or whether it's someone on site. But the matter is those issues that arise where there's not a clear answer or a clear path, or you don't have past practice there. Right now, we do get with Mr. McGinnis. We brainstorm those ideas. Mr. McGinnis goes to outside people at times and he'll have those conversations. But it would be nice also for those the small percent where we need that very specific answer from someone who's an expert in that field to be able to help and assist.
I think it's a good point, though, that you made. We always go to Jeff first. We always do. And then Jeff goes, okay, this is a Julie Weatherly issue. Let's get with her. He can't be an expert in everything. It's not possible. But like Marcus said, we always say, Jeff, what do you think about this? And if it is that ESE issue, he says, well, we gotta go see Julie. We gotta talk to Julie. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking to replace Jeff. We're asking to give him the opportunity, just like we gave him the ESE consultant, to give him a labor law consultant that he, not only I can work with, but he can work with. So I think it's important.
At the moment, he has the ability and the opportunity to seek those labor law experts and consultants when he thinks
and
it's
that's the
possible.
time-consuming part.
And let me explain. I've had some experience with this before in a municipal setting where we had two lawyers, and unfortunately, we got two opinions sometimes, and they were not in agreement. We spent, with all due respect to the superintendent, we've spent 40 minutes on this issues at the past workshop and at the meeting without any motions being made, unless there are going to be some motions made. I'm not sure about the appropriateness of having this on the agenda again. And of course, some of my fellow board members may be prepared to do that, but they were not at the last time. So,
But does it? Yeah, I'm sorry.
The bottom line, and I think I've been very clear with my position, but one of the most important things that's not even being brought up is if we hire another attorney, I've not heard one word mentioned about cost. Now, in other words, hey, the list that Ms. Gallion furnished us. Now, I can tell you, I am not in favor of hiring another attorney. And Mr. Destin just mentioned I've known organizations that's had to. Well, the thing is unless somebody shows me that if we go the route that's being suggested, or, we had a $300,000 legal bill this past year, well, if we hire another attorney, what's our legal bill going to be next year? In other words, if we're going to now hire another attorney, are we going to add 30-40% to our legal budget? I mean, no one's ever mentioned to me that if we're supposedly going to be hiring another attorney to be taking over from what I understand, a great deal of Mr. McGinnis's responsibilities.
No.
Well, then, has anybody looked or mentioned what this consultant, the attorney that's going to be on call, how much is that on cost us? How much more is that on cost us? And to me, there's not any way that I can support hiring another attorney when not one word's been mentioned about cost. Well, you know, when we look, we go back and review the last 4 or 5 years that we just had a list gave to us, and because of the times that we live in, you know, when we look at that, we spent $1.2 million in the last 5 years on legal fees, not counting. We didn't even get into the fact of the lawsuits that we settled in all that time, even though, yes, you know, the rhetoric is always, well, insurance kicks in except for a small amount. That's true, but over the long haul, we end up paying. But the main thing is we're talking about wanting to hire another attorney when we had $300,000 last year. In the last 5 years, we had $1.2 million. Well, I cannot be in favor of supporting anything that we don't pour more money into it. And until somebody comes back and says, well, this new way we on go is on be budget neutral, is it on cost us more, is it on cost us less? And there's not any way, and I've had this discussion with Ms. Jackson, I've had a discussion with several people, but I mean, I don't see anything at this point in time that's been brought up that's on warrant of change, unless it, to me, if you, I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but anytime I've ever tried to talk to a lawyer, I've always ended up being money. And if we don't add another attorney, is it on be added, is that on be another 20%, 30% that's on be put into legal fees? And until I've given that answer, I can't support it.
And I think it's important to note, Mr. Walker, I'm hoping we would avoid all of those extra legal fees that we have to go out and pay these firms for representing us. That's the point of this, is to avoid having to do that. And I understand Mr. Destin's point that don't like to have 2 attorneys, don't want 2 attorneys. We already have a half a dozen out there that we're paying right now, that I think would help us avoid this. And I don't expect this to pass. I don't. But I'm going to put it on here,
Well,
and,
let me say this,
and that's just all I'm going to say.
It may or may not pass.
I
but
don't expect it.
It may pass in a version that might be in a different direction. But I guess there are several things that I have that questions that I would like to just to think about here. The first one would be for our attorney, and I'll come back to this question in just a moment, Mr. McInnes. But in the meantime, I guess, given the fact that the superintendent has placed this on the agenda, I'd like for you to perhaps speak to the school board regarding the compulsions of the school board in terms of this particular request. But in the meantime, Mr. Chambers, I do have a question for you. I do understand the desire to have legal advice regarding some of these, for lack of a better word, I'll call them unique situations that we are confronted with. And I was just curious, because this asks for a contract. Would you imagine that the contract for legal services would require the legal opinion that you receive from this contracted service to be in writing to you?
Yes. Absolutely.
And that would be an interesting study, because I think that we all know that while we seek legal advice, the actual ruling that may be rendered is not necessarily to our benefit. It may in fact be adversarial. But so that was the question I had regarding the particular contract. I also heard something today that I had never heard before. I might have just missed it, or perhaps the other board members can stand me corrected. I think I heard that this contracted service would require that this attorney be the chief negotiator. Is that correct?
That is what I'm recommending, yes.
So this motion then would require that the contracted attorney would be the chief negotiator for the school district and the school board?
No, for the contract between the union and the school district. That is what I understand. That is what they are used for in most counties.
And then I'd like to know just a little bit about the particular language of this motion that the superintendent is asking for. That language itself, I guess, you know, we had the question about would we support this or be opposed to this, and I made the remark that I wasn't sure because I didn't know what the motion's language was going to be. So I certainly would appreciate having an advanced view of that language prior to that being proposed at the school board meeting, should that language be made available to the board members, perhaps even via email.
Okay.
So those are some of the questions that I had just in general about this particular item. And Mr. Attorney, if you might render some advice to the school board regarding this particular motion as being requested by the superintendent.
Well, as I have discussed before with this board and the superintendent in times when this question in maybe a little different manner has come up, there, in any situation where there is a potential conflict between the role of the superintendent and that of the board, then clearly both the board and the superintendent are entitled to have legal counsel and that be paid for by the district. We basically do that at the current time. Those situations often do arise in the area of employment and labor law issues. So, as you know, when there is any type of an employment hearing before the board, I come forward with a recommendation that we retain another counsel who will represent the superintendent in the district, because I can't both represent the board during the hearing and prosecute the case at the same time. That's been a long-standing practice here, and we do that whenever those matters arise. So in those situations, then that is the established law in Florida, that both the superintendent and the district and the board are entitled to legal counsel in those situations. One observation I might make about this situation: currently we have an approved fee arrangement with the Allen Norton and Blue firm in Tallahassee, who is a labor law specialist firm. That's what they do. We also have an approved fee arrangement with Attorney Joe Hammonds in Pensacola, who, as of recently, we've been using more for our hearings here before the board. He's been representing the district and the superintendent in those matters. I don't know if this fully addresses the request, but one thing that I could see that I think would expedite those situations. Currently, I come to the board each time that we need to engage one of those firms, even though we do have a standing fee arrangement with
Right.
them. The only one thing I could see that I would put on the table would be if I had an ability and we needed to consult with one of those attorneys, you know, in between board meetings, which is, you know, usually gives us a 2-week window, and
Right.
sometimes we do need to talk. And
Right.
and I'm fortunate enough, because of relationships, I can make phone calls and get some information. It's not always billed to anybody. I mean, just it's a professional courtesy.
Right.
But I would see that as a helpful thing if I had that ability to at least have the authority to call and get one of those attorneys engaged to assist in those limited areas of just the HR and the labor law area, without having to wait for a couple of weeks to come here formally to get that done.
Well, and we've done the same kind of thing with outside investigative services. We have a standing contract, if you will, that,
Right.
that we can do that there. And I know that Mr. Chambers mentioned Mrs. Weatherly as an attorney that we use, I guess, kind of in that capacity. So pertaining to this particular agenda item then, when it says a motion to approve a contract, such a contract might be exactly what it is that you've alluded to. That should there be a particular issue in HR, that Mr. Chambers might contact you, and should you have such a contract there, then you could reach out without having to come back to us 2 weeks later and have our approval. You could do it immediately.
And I don't even know that type of an arrangement takes a separate contract. You've got approved fee letters in place. That simply, to me, could be simply an action of the school board authorizing me to do that under those existing fee letters.
Okay, and so that would provide the superintendent then with her requested legal services other than just your services to be provided to HR.
If that arrangement that Mr. Chambers mentioned that I've just talked about, if that accomplishes, now, I'm not addressing the issue of collective bargaining services. That's an entirely different matter. But in regard to just being able to get focused additional labor law input, I would see that we could achieve that in that way if that worked with Mr. Chambers and with the superintendent.
And meet the objective as intended, I think, in this particular agenda item.
The important thing is Ms. Jackson is the one proposing this, but I would assume at some point she'd need to give input whether this would satisfy her or not. I mean, there's no need to create something if this is not what she's truly wanting. I mean, she's the one asking for the particular service. Well, if we sit here discussing some alternative plan, well, if this is not what she wants or don't satisfy her, I don't understand why we want to go that direction. I mean, Ms. Jackson, would something like we just discussed, would that satisfy you or not?
I haven't had time to think about
Well, I mean, you understand though, there's no need of contemplating some plan that she's the one feeling like she needs additional legal services, and we sat there coming up with an alternative plan, but unless this satisfies her, I don't understand why we want to go that direction.
Well, for the same reason, we need a contract with Julie Weatherly. We need a contract for human resources. I'll leave it at that. Jeff has never not provided services for me, but I don't know these people. I don't work with these people. I don't get to ask them. I want to ask them before we get in here, before y'all, are we doing the right thing here? What should we do? How can we fix this or avoid this? This is all reactive and not proactive. And my question would be, why would you not want to protect the district? I don't understand it. It's not about me. It's not about me. But, like I said, I'm bringing it. If it doesn't get a motion, if it doesn't get anything, then, you know, it'll be what it is. And that's all I can say.
Well,
Thank you, Superintendent. Can I defer to
Sure.
Mr. Destin first? I think you were trying to.
I was just going to make the observation on your desire to see a motion. Only a board member can make a motion.
Absolutely, I understand.
So unless a board member is prepared to make a motion before the meeting or have one available for us, then it's going to be hard to see a motion.
You mean draft language?
Draft language, right.
well, I guess that's my question. I'm sorry, I didn't know if Mr. Walker was addressing on the days, but my question is on the agenda item, Superintendent, you've listed it as approval to contract for legal services, but there isn't a contract.
Correct.
So we can't make a motion. I guess that's my question.
I can't go get one without you saying I can go get one. How am I going to go and negotiate with someone when I don't even know that you would approve it if I did?
So you're asking, and I guess I'm just asking for clarification, what your agenda item is requesting. So you're asking approval to go seek a contract.
And then bring a contract back to
So
the
we
board.
wouldn't be voting necessarily to to have a contract or voting on a particular contract.
Mhm.
We're just voting to let you go out and seek a contract.
And
Is
bring
that
some
correct?
options back to the board and let them decide, which of those contracts would be the best. But I want to reiterate, this is about being proactive and not reactive. I don't understand why we would not, I really don't. I've tried to.
Well,
And I've talked to other superintendents. They don't understand why we don't have this either. And I keep saying, well, I keep trying, but there's, I'm not making any headway. And this is not going to, I'm not going to lose my mind over this, but what I will do is I'll just keep approaching it.
I guess my question, and maybe it should be more towards Mr. McGinnis, like you stated, obviously, that we have these fee agreements already with the Allen Norton and Blue firm and Mr. Hammonds. But we don't have such a fee agreement with Ms. Weatherly. We
Yes,
have a
no,
contract.
We have this. The way we use outside services is through a, if you will, a letter of representation. If you want to call that a contract, fine, but it's a letter.
Okay.
And the letter just simply says, I am available to provide legal advice and counseling to you in the area of, say, Ms. Weatherly, exceptional student education matters. And I agree to do that at the hourly rate of blank. And so that's what we have in place with Ms. Weatherly. Same kind of thing in place with Allen Norton and Blue, the same thing in place with Mr. Hammonds.
And I guess that was my
It's just a matter
question.
of access to those and I haven't had a chance to discuss that with Ms. Jackson, but if quicker access is the issue, there's a real easy fix to that. It is to simply get the board to authorize that access.
Well, and I guess that, and maybe this will help clarify Ms. Jackson's agenda item, and maybe that's something she wants to discuss with district staff. But I mean, my understanding after today's conversation is that the district finds it useful to have the ability to contact Ms. Weatherly as needed. And my understanding after today's conversation is that they would like that same ability to, and my understanding is Ms. Summers doesn't actually contact you to say.
No, she does.
Okay, so you do, okay. So I guess to kind of have a better understanding of the process of communicating. But I mean, just in summary, to go back to what Mr. Walker said, if you look at the finances of what we're paying annually, I mean, it's hard to compare, but roughly we're spending, around $260,000 a year between Mr. McGinnis and then, a list of various law firms that occasionally we contract out with. And I mean, as I stated before at the previous meeting, if you research what other districts do, there's a variety of options out there. Some people have in-house counsel only. Some people have in-house counsel that are employed and then have a contract attorney for the school board only. Some people contract out both. Districts much smaller than us have a school board attorney and then contract out with the labor law attorney. If we look at Broward County, one of the largest school districts in the United States, their contract with their head of general counsel is for $200,000. They have 270,000 students. We have 30,000. They're spending $200,000 for and they have multiple lawyers, but that's their top legal counsel. And it's in-house, it's dedicated, and of course that doesn't include benefits and options on the pay scale and all that goes with being an employee. But we're spending, on average, $260,000 annually, give or take, bang up years, if you will, where we need more legal services, and we're a small school district relatively on that kind of a scale. And so I guess I just want clarity on your agenda item.
Okay.
Are you what more specifically are you looking for? Is it just ease of access? Is it you want us to, or someone to make a motion to give you the authority to seek a contract?
I think a contract may be a word that we could work with here. I don't mind a letter of engagement. We've engaged this law firm to assist me when Marcus is dealing with something crazy out there. And that's not asking too much. I mean, we may need them twice a month. We may not need them at all. We may need them every day for 3 weeks. But have a letter of engagement with them so that I know Marcus can pick up the phone, I can pick up the phone, and we can call those people and get some advice. So I will work on the language of that particular, if that would be of help to the board to clarify that more.
And I appreciate that, Superintendent, and I want to make sure, Mr. McInnes, that we don't cross any boundaries here in regards to Mr. Destin's remark, and I understand that motions have to come from board members, and so the question would be then, can the superintendent draft recommended motion language and present it to board members?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of her drafting motions. I think she can lay out in writing her request that then, if a board member chose to convert that into a motion, that could be done.
Okay, Mr. Destin.
I would just have one last comment as to the Dade County, I think you were. Broward. We have no idea what they're spending. They have a full-time attorney that's $200,000, and until we got a complete analysis of what
they're spending lots more on legal services. I'm just saying,
Broward
just for
has
one
a full in-house law firm.
Essentially.
I mean, they've got 8 to 10
lawyers. Right.
Yeah, my point being that a comparison with them is not really realistic.
No, I wasn't comparing us.
Okay. But the other issue I'll make is,
yes, sir.
Our primary job here is to supervise and control the spending of the district's money. As we sit here now, Mr. McInnes is our gatekeeper on legal expenses. And I like his suggestion about being able to address the time issue by entering into those agreements so that they can contact the labor firm and the others as seen possible anytime that he needs to and that the staff needs him to. I don't have a problem with that. But it looks to me like we are trying to edge toward a system where the staff can contact at any time. We have no way of knowing what the expense would be or could be. We've got no control over it. We don't have a gatekeeper anymore. And that I could never vote for. We've got to have some kind of an estimate of what we're going to spend. Under the system that it appears we're contemplating, there won't be. I mean, it could be 200, it could be 500, it could be $1 million, depending on how many times we contact the specialists and use them and that would be an hourly rate. We would no longer have the gatekeeper that Mr. McInnes represents for us. So that's not a system that I think I could support without going through our gatekeeper and entering into those agreements with the specialized firms so that it can be done in a more timely fashion. I understand that and would support that, but just carte blanche, no, I couldn't do that.
But currently, the board has no idea how many times district staff is using Mr. McInnes services. I don't know what the superintendent will suggest. I think we've each asked for some clarity on what her agenda item would consist of. But I don't think, to my knowledge, what I heard today wasn't a carte blanche thing. I mean, we don't know. You don't know any time that I've called Mr. McInnes, in regards to a district item, and that's why I have brought up at a previous meeting that I think we should annually review legal service expenses, because in the tenure that I've had on the board, we haven't. And we should review a contract on an annual basis or some kind of semi-annual basis. Not to say necessarily that you know, we want to change it, but we do spend money, and currently the board, to my knowledge, in the past or currently hasn't been reviewing what we are or aren't spending on legal services, and that's why I brought it up a couple of meetings ago, was because it is, you know, roughly $260,000 over, you know, the past 6 or 7 years. It is $1.8 million over the last 7 years. And so I do think it's something we should review and discuss annually.
Could I ask
would
a question?
make one point to you, though, that Mr. McGinnis works for us.
For the board.
And for the board.
For the board.
And we do review the bills on almost every agenda. I see them.
Not cumulatively, though.
But we do look at them, and if we reach the point where we think Mr. McGinnis is costing us too much, we can do something about it.
Right. If
And
we
so-
review it on an annual basis.
Or a meeting by meeting basis that we do. And so if there's a problem as a board, we can fix that problem. If it's a group of attorneys who we do not have that control over, that we're not seeing exactly what the price is, that we cannot say, you're spending too much money, I have a problem with that.
But we would be able to if
With a letter.
we reviewed our annual legal services, just like I didn't know how much we were spending on Allen Norton and Blue this past year until I received this document I requested from Ms. Scallon. Now I know how much money we spent on Allen Norton and Blue, and now I can say, you know, hey, that's more than we've spent in years past, and that was part of my impetus to say, hey, do we need to consider a labor law attorney specialist for the superintendent, because we've had an increase in expenses. Without asking for this and doing some kind of annual review, we wouldn't know how much, not just Mr. McGinnis's fees are, and like you said, monthly we receive those bills, but cumulatively and comparatively to look historically at what we've been spending and barring significant legal issues facing the district, we can do that. But to my knowledge, the board hasn't done that in the past, and I'm hopeful that we would, because I agree it behooves us to know what we are spending annually on legal services, not just for Mr. McGinnis, but other contracted attorneys that we've approved every so often
And
at various meetings.
That would be my question. Is there a limit on what we, on the Julie Weatherly agreement? Is there a limit on that?
The rates are what the board approves.
The rates.
There's not like a ceiling, and I think we also need to understand, fortunately, we don't have to contact her that often for those matters, but she's certainly there available at an approved rate when we have to have her.
So if we had a letter of agreement with an attorney that had a rate, a fixed rate, you know, I don't even mind if the board says, okay, up to this point. And if it gets to this point, then we have to do something differently. All we want is some advice. We don't need them to litigate for us, because Jeff's going to go find somebody to litigate. We just need somebody to help us stay out of litigation. That's what I want. And I know we beat this to death.
Well, that would go back to what I proffered earlier, that, and I think you referred to it as a letter of engagement, and this is good in the terms of education. I mean, you know, the school board by law can only have 3 employees by law. And one of them's the attorney. One of them can be an architect, and I think we can even choose to hire an independent auditor, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
But even though we only have 3 employees, our policy states for cost-saving measures that we share our employee with the school district for legal services. And should there be a letter of engagement drafted such that HR, if they had a unique problem, could contact Mr. McInnes, and should he not have the ready answer on the spot at the very moment the question is offered, then he could reach out to a a labor expert, that might in fact accommodate the superintendent's request. Now, regarding the chief negotiator, that's a new wrinkle. And that's one that I'll now have to think about between now and Monday, I guess.
Well, and if there is no vote on Monday, if there is no motion, then this will be a time where I have to decide which direction I want to go. I just would love to be able to provide for my staff what they need. And it almost seems to me like it doesn't make any sense to me that we wouldn't want that protection. It makes no sense to me. And I don't think it's good for the district. You talk about saving money. I mean, look at how much we're spending on outside counsel right now. Could we avoid that? Could we have a letter that says we want to engage with whoever, X, and we would put a ceiling limit on that of X, and if we ever had to go above that, it could come back to the board for their approval. I just feel like we're doing a disservice to this district by not providing that service to our, and that's just all I have to say. But I will work on some of this stuff, and Rita helped me craft this because I'm not as good at crafting things, and she knows money much better than I do.
And I would just add, Superintendent, my anticipation would be that the school board would ask our employee, our attorney, to help render some language, perhaps in this, I think you called it, letter of engagement. Should that be the motion, and should that pass?
Well, he would have to.
Such that,
I don't know how to do that.
And serving as the contact point, such that we could try to do all the things that I hear all the board members talking about, and that's to try to control the cost. And so I would look to you, Mr. McInnes, for your advice and counsel and help on something like that. Should that be the motion? And should that pass if it is? But I'm ready to move on if y'all are.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. All right. 9.5. Clear certification requirements and issuance of contracts for the 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.6, out-of-field report for 2018-2019 school year, presented by Ms. Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.7, personnel recommendations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.8, employee transfers, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.9, employee suspension, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.10, employment separations, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.11, reinstatement reimbursement of sick leave due to line of duty illness, injury, medical examination, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 9.12, leave without pay, presented by Mr. Marcus Chambers, Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum and Instruction, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. Discussion item 10.1, Best and Brightest Teacher Scholarship Program Status Report on Legal Review.
And we're still looking at that issue. I appreciate the information Mr. Hope brought forward this morning. We are aware that there are districts in Florida, some paying, there are districts in Florida not paying. But I appreciate his information that was provided, and certainly that will go into the mix of things that are being considered.
Well, and along those lines, and I too appreciate the information about the other county in Florida that's doing this. I guess the question I have about that would be, and this may be a Ms. Scallon question, but just because an auditor does not find an objection in a previous year, does that mean they cannot find an objection in a current or future year?
No, it does not, and you can be, one district can be cited and another district cannot be cited.
All right.
It depends on the random sample and what they're specifically looking at.
Very good, I see. Random sample, I remember that.
It would just be easy if they could just give us a clear,
straight answer.
Straight answer.
Yeah, give me a straight answer. I agree.
I know when I looked into it, there were even counties that were paying their adult ed teachers, but not their pre-KD teachers, because their interpretation was pre-K was not K through 12 because it was pre-K. So it is kind of all
This
over.
issue is all over the board among Florida school districts, I can assure you of that.
Let me just ask one simple question. In an issue like this where the legislature says, local boards, you get to decide, is it not the fact that the decisions we make have what we refer to as the color of law, unless a court says otherwise? Now, we have auditors, I understand, that can give opinions, but when the legislature says, district, you make the decision, and then we make the decision, it seems to me that it would be difficult to say you've made the wrong decision.
And I think, Mr. Destin, that's going to be that is a critical piece of what I'm looking at right now, because that may very well be what it comes down to. And that's not telling you what the black letter law answer is going to be. It's just saying, based upon these factors we have, this is the best we can do.
Until a court decides otherwise.
Right. And then you have to be prepared if the auditors come in and they simply have developed at their state office level a different opinion that they're applying out there to everybody. Then all we can do is take the opinion we stood on, and they take theirs, and there you go. I mean, that's
back to those legal costs again.
Right.
That's it. Got it. All right. So any other items that are moved? Construction program owner's business. We'll wait for Mr. Walker to give us a report on Monday evening. Section 12, Information Technology and Seat Management Contract, 12.1 CACI Task Order. This is the item I read, of course, 2-117, Revision 1 for installation of data drops in modular furniture at Central Administrative Complex or relocation of HR department, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith, Specialist, Seat Management, recommended by the Superintendent. All right, Mr. Attorney, your business, sir?
One item, Mr. Chairman. I had a phone conference earlier in the week with Attorney Todd Gray, who you may remember is with the law firm in Washington that does FCC work, and the district has over the years had occasion to work with Mr. Gray because we do, both the school district and the Public Schools Foundation, maintain each 4 educational broadcast system licenses. And the board and the foundation both currently have leases in place that will run through, I think it's early 2021, where we're leasing out 3, each of us lease out 3 of the 4 channels to Sprint. That's been in place for many years, and Mr. Gray has always assisted us in those leases because they're very specialized when you're dealing with the FCC matters. He contacted me for 2 issues recently. One is that there currently is some FCC rulemaking underway in Washington dealing with the EBS systems, and he represents dozens and dozens of educational institutions across the country with their leases and with their licenses. He represents a very large national group that is focused just on the educational broadcasting issue, and they have retained him to develop comments and file those back with FCC in response to the proposed rulemaking. What he contacted me, and he's contacted other clients and license holders to say, is that he is seeking our joining in, if you will, not from the standpoint of paying any money or contracting for anything, but simply the comments he's ready to send back, which have to go back tomorrow. He was seeking other educational license holders simply joining in those comments, and I have reviewed those with him, have looked at them. Basically, what his comments are all heading in the area of not having any changes adversely affect the educational licenses that are out there, adding some advantages and expansions in those licenses to benefit the educational institutions and holders of those. So what I've done is reviewed this briefly with the superintendent. I don't see a reason not to have the foundation and the board or district simply lend their name to the long list he has already of those that are joining in. Northwest Florida State College has agreed to be on that list because they have similar educational channels. The superintendent is okay with that happening. Obviously, we can't get a vote from you by tomorrow, but I was simply going to let you know, unless there was an objection in discussions with Ms. Jackson, we would recommend that we allow the district's, the board's name, and I'll talk to the president of the foundation later today, to simply be put on the list of entities that have these licenses that are in support of the comments that Mr. Gray is making back to FCC. So that's one item.
Does he have, I mean, you're in receipt of those comments? Is it something that you received digitally that we could be copied on?
Sure, I could do that, yeah. And like I said, I've talked with him through them because a lot of them are very technical in nature, but in my discussions with him, all of his responses back to the many other groups in the country, I guess, that are commenting and pushing rules are trying to provide some stability and protection for these educational system licenses that are out there.
To maintain them.
Right, correct. So that's one item. And then secondly, there has been an inquiry to him from our current lessee of the licenses to lease the fourth channel that we have and to lease the fourth channel that the foundation has, to simply add those into the leases and begin paying additional lease fees for those. One of the things Mr. Gray has suggested is that because we're, from the standpoint of these kind of leases and FCC, we're rolling up on a window when we would start beginning to look at renegotiating those leases. He thinks there may be some advantage to us going ahead and just entering into those kind of renegotiations now, earlier, trying to get some better leases in place. A lot of things have changed in that industry and that market since these were negotiated probably 12 years ago. There's some opportunities to do some long-term leases that probably would generate more revenue for the foundation and the school district. So Monday night, I would be asking you to authorize us to retain Mr. Gray to look at the issue of those lease negotiations, and he has given me an estimated budget if we were to renegotiate both of those leases. He was estimating $7,500 to $10,000 to get all of that done. That's just an estimate. Obviously, he'd be working on hourly rates like other attorneys, but I think it would be in our interest to have him take a look at that and see if there's an advantage, and talk to the current lessee to see if they would be willing to open those negotiations, and we might be able to bring back to you then some type of recommended new leases for longer terms with some good benefits to them.
Okay. So you'll be looking for a motion on that?
On that issue,
item?
yes, sir.
Okay.
On the other, unless there's some objection, I think the superintendent's prepared to add the names on to just to the comment list so that he could turn those in tomorrow.
I haven't heard any, but I've been listening.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right. Madam Superintendent, you've got your out-of-state field trip request, but you may have some other items today.
Just a couple of things for the public. When we do school closures, I think it's really important for folks to understand we do this in conjunction with the Emergency Management Center. They tell us their best guess for what they think will happen. We also look at the National Weather Service. We consult with many people before we make a decision. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know whether a hurricane is going to go north, south, east, or west. But they use their best guess, and I really appreciate Mr. Koutsaredis. We were working on this the night before and talking with people who are in the know and with other counties. And I mean, it didn't come a hurricane here, but it could have. And I'm very thankful that you take it so seriously. The second thing that I'm proud of is the 45-day response plan for ESE. That's another situation that we're having to remedy right now, today. I know they're working on that. They're looking for a place for that. And it's been one of those things that we were not prepared to have to do. And now we have to. So, and what that means is there was a time when a student could not be in the regular classroom because of behavior, whatever. And we could 45-day that student and have that student go home for 45 days to hopefully get some things under control. Well, we can no longer do that. So we've had to come up with an alternative plan for that for ESE, and we are absolutely on that. Mr. Palmer has done a phenomenal job in working through that. I wondered how our mental health counselors and all this new process Terry Schroeder's put into place would work. Unfortunately, we had the opportunity to test that at one of our high schools this week. Very responsive, very well organized, very it was wonderful to have licensed mental health counselors there to work with our students through a very, very difficult situation. And my hat's off to Niceville High School and how well they handled that and their briefing, and to our SROs who were on the spot and giving us information. Mr. Venuti's here. He always works hard to make sure we know what is happening and what we need to do. And again, I can't thank Rita and them enough for our TDE automation, Rita. I am thankful it saves Martha hundreds of hours of time, and it's going to be incredible. And now I just want to make sure that we get those time sheets automated for us, Mr. Horton. So we are working very hard on that, and I really appreciate the other. It's incredible, the time it saves. That's all.
All right, Superintendent. So, board members, let me do this. We've got multiple public hearings, so let's go on down to section 17, and I'll come back to conclude with board members' business. All right. 17.1, this is section 17. 17.1, required local effort millage rate of 4.1130 mils presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.2, basic discretionary operating millage rate of 0.7480 mils presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent for approval. 17.3, capital outlay millage rate of 1.5000 mils presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.4, total millage levy of 6.3610 mils presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.5, Resolution 18-06, adopting the millage rates for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.6, Okaloosa County School District Budget General Fund for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.7, Okaloosa County School District Budget Debt Service Fund for fiscal year 2018-2019, recommended by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.8 Okaloosa County School District Budget Capital Project Funds for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.9 Okaloosa County School District Budget Special Revenue Funds Federal Programs for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Mrs. Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.10 Okaloosa School District Budget Special Revenue Funds Food Service for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. 17.11 Okaloosa School District Budget for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. And then 17.12 Resolution 18-07, adopting the Okaloosa School District budget for fiscal year 2018-2019, presented by Ms. Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer, and recommended by the Superintendent. And board members, as is usual and customary, because these are legal matters, and Mr. McInnes, I'll be turning much of this over to you, sir. All right. All right, so now moving back up, we have board members' announcements and requests for information. So, Mr. Destin, sir, I'll start with you if you have anything.
I don't have anything this morning. I would ask you about the add-on agenda item that's not on our computer, but that you noticed us about earlier.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Which one's that, 12.1?
Yeah.
Is
it on the computer?
Yes. Well, it's added. It was added after it was published, so
There you go.
that's why I read it. But they did add it, but after it was published. So.
And I had one question.
Yes, sir.
That is part of the expense for the moving of HR up here. Did we ever get a number on what the other part of the expense is? What is the total expense we've spent or will spend? I know we talked about some numbers earlier that were inclusive or not inclusive of this item.
I'll have to double check that.
Okay. If you'll have it for me Monday, I would appreciate it.
All right. Anything else on that particular item?
Nope.
Okay. All right then. So, Ms. Thrush, your turn, ma'am.
I just had in regards to the capital budget, we had discussed at the budget workshop the item for covered walkways for our portables, and you had provided some information of the number of portables that we had, and then Dr. White had requested which of those portables had ESE students, and you provided that. And then I had requested to know which of those portables have covered walkways. So we have some that have covered walkways. So if it's possible.
And I directed staff to get that information for you.
Okay. Okay. If we could just get that sent to board members.
We can forward that email to you. We have 29.3% of the portables have covered walkways to them. Out of the 167, and it's broke down by school.
And then we can see which ESE portables.
I haven't matched up the ESE with the covered walkways, but we can find that out.
Okay, just if possible before Monday. Okay. And then the only other item I was going to mention wasn't for information. It was just thanking our school ambassadors from the school district who attended the recent Techman Industry Day. Great opportunity for some of our administrators and teachers, but also our students to participate in the Economic Development Council's Techman Day that gets them exposure to different industries in our area and beyond, and appreciate all of the efforts of our CTE program to work with Ms. Zeppelin and Techman in such a great joint venture effort. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thrush. Mr. Bryant.
Just two things. First, I would like to thank Ms. Scallon, and we could talk about all the work she did on the budget, but a small thing that she helped me do here recently was I had a substitute teacher who last year had sent me an email just wanting to know how they can get their paycheck automatically deposited. So ran that email by Ms. Scallon, and there were some issues last year, but this year we were able to implement that for substitute teachers to be able to have their paychecks automatically deposited. So, you know, a small thing like that goes a long way with our substitute teachers and those temporary employees that we have. So I wanted to thank Ms. Gallen for helping me get that resolution for that particular employee. And also, I do want to thank Mr. McInnes personally, just for everything that you do, sir. I appreciate all that you do. And I will tell you this, the other day I called him just for some advice, and he had surgery that morning. And, you know, the fact that he picked up the phone and tried his best, of course, I told him I'd call him back later, but, you know, this tells you that, you know, he's there to help us, and I appreciate all that you do. And even when you're down and out, you still pick up that phone, so I appreciate that. So.
Or on vacation.
Or on vacation. And that's all I have, Dr. White.
All right, Mr. Bryant. All right, now, board members, this is the one that I forgot last time, but we're going to try to remember from now on. This is a new one. Are there any members of the public desiring to address the school board? Seeing none, unless there's any other business. Staff, anything? All right, we're adjourned.
You didn't do your
Do you take care, man?